I couldn't remain silent after I saw those neo-Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches in one of the historic cities in America, followed by and accompanied by white supremacists, and then being objected to by other citizens and the president saying they're good people in both places. Come on, man. This is a battle for the soul of America. This is a battle for the soul of America. We cannot afford to lose it.
Welcome back to Harbor. For many people, this week was a sad reminder of just how divisive President Trump has been and made this country. On the border, there were reports of toddlers being forced into court. Imagine, in a court alone because their families are seeking asylum. At the Supreme Court, the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy created a very real possibility. The fate of issues like abortion rights, the environment, unions, union rights, guns, gun rights will fall into the hands of a partisan court firmly aligned with the Republican Party. At a fundraiser on Thursday night, in fact, former President Barack Obama gave some of his most pointed remarks since he left the presidency. According to Politico, Obama told Democratic donors that night they were right to be concerned. But he said they should not wait for the perfect message or messenger, I think, in order to vote. While never mentioning President Trump by name, he warned Democrats not to underestimate Trump's brand of politics. Fear is powerful, he said. But he added, the majority of the American people prefer a story of hope. A majority of the American people prefer a country that comes together rather than being divided. Well, we'll see about that, won't we? We saw examples of this in last year's massive Women's March, which brought together millions of people to advocate for human rights, women's rights, and health care. Look at those, all those cities converging in one point. Yesterday, roughly 600 protesters were arrested near the U.S. Capitol, demanding an end to forced family separations at the border. Among them was U.S. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal from Washington State. She joins me now, along with Sam Stein, politics editor of the Daily Beast. Love that name. And Jason Johnson, politics editor of something more calm, The Root.com. Thank you. You're not with the Beast, you're with The Root. Anyway, well, thank you. Congresswoman, you're at the ramparts, as we used to say in the 60s. You're out there. You got handcuffed. No, you didn't get handcuffed.
No handcuffs.
What was your protest about? What did it involve, and why did you do it?
Well, 2,500 women from all over the country came to really show their moral outrage at the president and his policy, zero tolerance, zero humanity, as I say, policy, putting kids in cages, putting parents who are seeking asylum into prisons. And so they were there to say, we're putting ourselves on the line. I went to speak to them, actually, but I was so moved by how passionate they were and, you know, the stories that we were all telling. And so I sat down with them and I got arrested. I believe civil disobedience is an important tactic to really push an issue to the forefront.
Well, that's good to watch, and it's a participatory democracy, as we called it in the old days, in the 60s.
Yeah,
but I got to tell you, he's about to pick the decisive member of the Supreme Court. Somebody will be there for, he thinks, 45 years, perhaps, sitting on the bench.
This is a horrible, horrible thing. I do think that if we can make it clear to the American people what's at stake, that this will also help us to get a wave out across the country, make sure that we win back the House, make sure that we introduce some checks and balances. That's what we don't have.
What good is it if they have the election and they pick the court justice, the decisive fifth member out of 9 people, yeah. The 5th one makes the difference, before the election?
Well, that is, we got to, as you have said over and over and over.
I will keep saying they got to find a way to stop it. They got to come up with a plan.
They've got to stop it, and that's just.
If old McConnell passes it by 1 vote, everybody in the press will say, what a brilliant parliamentarian he was to do it with just 1 vote. Well, if he's brilliant to do it, it doesn't take brilliance to stop him, Jason.
No, and this is the thing. There's 2 issues. It's always hard to run on the Supreme Court, but now people can, right? It's not just abortion, because there's going to be some people in the country like, I don't know how they feel about that. But it's also, this is the justice who will decide if the president can pardon himself, because that's the end game.
You mean this president?
Yes, this president can pardon
himself. If he gets his way.
If he gets his way. So those are the 2 issues. And I think it's not just about the first person he picks. The Republicans play the long game. They may pick somebody ridiculous at first, let the Democrats fool themselves into thinking, okay, we got that person to go, and then pick someone more moderate. They've got to be prepared to fight all the way until the end. There's got to be some brilliant parliamentarian out there who knows how to stall this.
You know, Sam, I think a lot of this changed in 2000 when the Supreme Court picked the president. I know presidents picked the Supreme Court. In 2000, they picked the president.
Yes.
5 of them, including Ken. And I've always wanted to know how they got cert, how somebody in Florida, Jim Baker, somebody got the word to the Supreme Court, oh, come on down here and take over this election, stop the count, and you guys vote. And by the way, they voted entirely in partisan lines. Right. 5 Republicans on the court gave the presidency to W. W gave us the Iraq War. It all happened because of the court.
Yeah, I mean,
It's partisan voting.
I know there's a lot of anguish right now among Democrats about the likelihood that the court will be pulled to the right and tarnish the court
To the
as
Republican side, not just
tarnish the court as essentially a functioning arm of the Republican Party. But the truth is, as you just illuminated, which is the court's reputation has been damaged for a while now, and it's not just Bush v. Gore. Citizens United was a case that people thought was unfairly decided. A bunch of 5-4 cases that have come down where it really is almost predictable in advance what the decision is going to be. Yeah. And so we had this sort of veneer of bipartisanship, that the court was immune to this type of partisan influences. The truth is, I'm not really sure. And I'm not really sure, because you can go back to the FDR days, the court packing days, but certainly there was an aura and an era where the court
I think with Nixon, when they came out unanimously and said release the tapes, they spoke as a body, almost of an elevated body.
To that point, some of those judges were appointed by Nixon. So to your point about how this court will have to decide on the potential that Trump gets to pardon himself, there is maybe a small sliver of hope that there can be people who rise above.
Your thoughts about this, because you sit in the legislative branch. You heard Trump today, he referred to my government. I have never heard that phrase in my... We don't have a government. Britain has governments because they have a parliamentary system. We have the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the courts. And there's nobody can say my government.
He has been saying that about the Department of Justice, you know, the loyalty pledges. I mean, that is how he thinks about this, which is what is so dangerous. And I do think one of the things that worries me about how we are electing Supreme Court justices today, or appointing Supreme Court justices today, is the influence of big money. You look at, you look at Gorsuch and how much money was put into that race in order to...
You're calling it a race.
Well,
it was a race.
It was, because the senators vote on that, and they put money into those targeted states with those specific senators, and they're going to do it again. They've already started doing it again. So that, that does worry me, and I think that we have to continue to call for everybody to play hardball.
It's an amazing coalition now, which is Fox, the president, and now increasingly perhaps the Supreme Court. President Trump sat down with Fox News today to discuss what he's looking for in the Supreme Court. That's sort of an intramural conversation. Here's what he said.
Are you going to ask your nominees beforehand how they might vote on Roe versus Wade?
Well, that's a big one, and probably not. They're all saying, don't do that, you don't do that, you shouldn't do that, but I'm putting conservative people on. And I'm very proud of Neil Gorsuch. He has been outstanding. His opinions are, so well written, so brilliant. And I'm going to try and do something like that, but I don't think I'm going to be so specific.
I can't imagine this particular president. He's obviously as smart as most politicians, but sitting down and reading the opinions of Judge Gorsuch, I don't think he sat down and read them. That contradicts what the president promised to do back in October of 2016. Let's listen to what he promised as a candidate.
Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court.
Well, that's pretty clear.
That's pretty clear.
How does he know they are when he doesn't ask them?
He has lots of conversations long before, and I read that article that said he's actually been courting Kennedy. I mean, through his son.
We'll get to that in the show tonight, of this elaborate sort of seduction to get him to quit, not just this year, but to quit by a date certain, which gives the Supreme Court.
Well, the thing about Supreme Court confirmation hearings and processes is it's so much kabuki theater. Right. Everyone will say, I can't answer these things, it's potentially going to come before me, when in truth we know that Donald Trump wants someone to overturn Roe. We know that the Federalist Society is pushing this. We know that Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans are mostly interested in this. And the question we really are waiting for is, will Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski demand that any prospective nominee answer that question? And to be honest, they're going to dance around it.
I think it's going to be Amy Barrett, and I think they've got it figured out already.
They probably do, but like I said, I don't know if that's going to be their first run. I think they may think that this is in the long term. The other issue is this, and Barrett qualifies, and there'll be probably some surprise people. They're going to pick somebody who's like 15 minutes out of law school. Like, they're going to pick the youngest person they can.
45 years.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to go with life expectancy with this crowd. Anyway, in a surprise appearance on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert last night, Jon Stewart also called on Democrats to fight. Here he is, the cheerleader from the right side. Let's watch.
I just want to say, if there's one hallmark to your presidency that I think we're finding the most difficult, is that no matter what you do, it always comes with an extra layer of gleeful cruelty. Donald, you could have absolutely made a more stringent border policy that would have made your point about enforcement. But I guess it wouldn't have felt right without a Dickensian level of villainy. And what Donald Trump wants is for us to stop calling his cruelty and fear and divisiveness wrong, but to join him in calling it right. And this we cannot do. And by not yielding, and I say, by not yielding, we will prevail. Unless, of course, the Democratic leadership continues to be a bunch of thuggless.
So that last outburst, he was Adlai Stevenson compared to what we have now, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, look, you need to say that. Look, you know, Jon Stewart always represented that sort of rage of the left, and it was first the New York left, now it's the sort of entire left. But resistance is the only way to go at this particular point. And the leadership of the Democratic Party is behind the times for how frustrated and angry their base is.
Yeah.
And perhaps when they're all gone, if they win if the Democrats take over the House this fall, we'll see some more active leadership. Because right now,
New York
they're
will
not
take over the House this fall. Anyway, Cortez is leading the way. Anyway, U.S. Congressman Jayapal, Sam Stein.
Yes.
And Jason Johnson. Real simple pronunciations, and this wonderful one here. Up next, rumors are swirling. The chief of